region that we exist within. So maybe we can get into that conversation during today's session. But as we see this new language of geopolitics emerging as the great powers jostle for influence and power, we're also conscious that the costs of conflict are likely to be high for all sides across the region. So today we really want to talk about how likely it is for the region to become a flashpoint for the next war between great powers, what kinds of new architecture or how do we bolster existing architecture across Asia Pacific to try to prevent or manage conflict, and how we can think about managing these rivalries or tensions for secondary and middle and secondary power states. So I would like to begin with you, General Arun, former Army Commander of the Indian Army. I will start with you by asking you a very broad question to kick off the conversation because there's so much that we can talk about. But really, to start us off, what are the key trends or emerging geostrategic flashpoints that we need to be paying the most attention to across Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific?
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Beck. Firstly, let me thank Zulu and CGS for having got me here again. It's always a pleasure to come to Dhaka. And I think he actually started the trend. This is my 5th visit in the last 1 year. So for different events that happen, but it's always good to come here and good to see old friends and make some new friends once you come into these conferences. I think just to put the Asia Pacific and Indo-Pacific at rest, let me say the Indo-Pacific structure for the is actually requirements of the US, because I think the Indo-Pacific geographical lines are more related to the PASCOM command. It doesn't cater for the CENTCOM or the AFRICACOM, so that's how the Indo-Pacific is. When India looks at the Indo-Pacific, we look at it in the Indian Ocean region, and you look at it from the east coast of Africa to the area of what you want to say is the, would be what, Western Pacific primarily, or Eastern Pacific primarily. That's what you would look at. So these are the two constructs, but I think more importantly is when you look at the new Asia Pacific, why the sudden interest, I think. It's not a new Asia Pacific. The Asia existed, the Pacific existed, the nations as states existed. But what has happened is that undoubtedly the economic center of gravity has shifted from the Euro-Atlantic to the Asia-Pacific region. If you see the growth patterns that have happened, the economic growth patterns that have happened, here the growth patterns would be around 4.2, 4.3%. If you look at now towards the Euro-Atlantic, you're looking at 1.82%. So I think geoeconomics has been a driving force as far as a key element to the emerging geostrategic trends. The other aspect is geopolitics. And why is this geopolitics coming? Because I think contestation, when it comes in with rising powers and existing powers, the problem then comes into being. And this is linked also to the question that you asked, that wherever there is contestation between two competing powers, whether it is competition, whether it is conflict, whether it's cooperation, whatever kind of contestation that happens on any spectrum or any lines of differentiation, those can become flashpoints when both of them have an interest which is at clash. Whereas an area like the Asia Pacific, where there are smaller nations which were carved out, a lot of them after colonial predominance, have borderlines which have problems. But those borderlines are linked bilaterally or trilaterally to nations, and those will never really be a flashpoint, but they would be the causes of conflict. So today, if I had to look at what are the flashpoints, so before, that is the first point that I wanted to make. Second, let me just say, why a security architecture? And I think there are very learned people sitting here, those who've been in this field for a much longer period. We were practitioners who emanated into the area of dialogue and understanding and voicing an opinion. But what I would say is, I mean, thanks to the West failure, you had nation states, so everything looked at defense of nation states. You looked at your territorial boundaries. Second World War changed that. I mean, people like Walter Lippmann and people like those who wrote various articles talked about looking at security our defense and security from the perspective of core values of those nation states. So it's not just the territory, but my core values were impacted, then I need to get worried. And then I think the main guy was Robert McNamara, who spent 7 years as the Defense Secretary of Defense for US, both with I think between 61 69, took out this essay on the sense of security, and where he said security is no longer about state, it is about the citizen. And anything that impacts the citizen is an issue that matters. And what impacts the citizen? Water, climate change, food security, all of this security. So the whole gambit of security architecture has changed. So today when you look at the security architecture of Asia Pacific, it is not fighting a military alliance of Cold War 1.0, where you had the NATO and you had the Warsaw, because both were fighting and had battle lines drawn in Europe. So everybody was ready to just go to war and jump across the fence. No, that is not the same. So, and that is why the security architecture has lines of operation, lines of engagement, which are phenomenal. And that's why the role of bilateral, unilaterals, partnerships, and if there are alliances, but more often it's going to be partnerships. Because in a polycentric world order, I can't say that I don't want to talk to you, I'll move to you. I mean, it's like US and China. China has over $400 billion of treasury bonds, and the kind of trade that happens between the US and China, there's an umbilical linkage. If they decide to freeze the bonds, China will cry. If China wants to encash, then US will cry. So it's a polycentric world order. You can't say it was not Russia, Soviet Union, and India are the US and the Soviet Union. So I think the world has changed. So today, when you're looking at security architecture, let's just not talk about military alliances fighting each other. I mean, that's not the issue, because the challenges here are different. So just to sum it up, what has changed? 4 things have changed. There used to be a talk about a decade back, the rise of China. I'm sorry, that's history. China has risen. It is a revisionist power. It wants to sort of dominate the political landscape, and which is leading to various geostrategic trends that are emanating, and that is coming out from competition between the two powers and their rivalry. So if you have to look at this area, let's look at it at East Asia, which is Japan, South Korea, that belt, which is the East China Sea. You look at Taiwan, which becomes the fulcrum. You look at the South China Sea, and these are the 3 areas that you would look at. Where again, there is nuclear powers like North Korea, which is rabid, which creates instability, which may be a proxy for China, but is also addressing the concerns of US. So there is a challenge there. When you come to Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia is by and large being the economic hub. It has controlled and it's been sensible enough to ensure it's balanced the environment as it stands today. You come to South Asia, there are territorial issues which are historical anomalies of the independence after the colonial powers left. So there are conflict issues that will remain. And when you come to West Asia, where the fundamentalism seems to have overtaken, so that's a flashpoint area. So when I look at all these areas of conflict zone, there are conflict areas that will happen, but they are limited in concept and scope and the parties that can involve. But if I have to look at it from flashpoints, flashpoints exist only in the area where there's a contestation between the US and China. And where are they? The East China Sea. If I have to look at 4 flashpoints, and I think the Australians, very articulately talked about it. Was it your university or in one of the talks I read in one of the papers? It has been done very beautifully. North Korea, because of its nuclearization, so you've got the Korean Peninsula, which is a flashpoint. A flashpoint because you will have one being supported by China, the other being supported by the US. And there are treaties that have been linked, whether it's with Japan, whether it's with Indonesia, whether it is with countries with Philippines. So you have these kind of treaties. So there is a clash of these 2 players. So you've got the East China Sea, you have the Korean Peninsula, and you've got the South China Sea, because the South China Sea is the lifeline for 57 to 60% of energy and other kind of trade that goes through it. So everybody is impacted. So it's going to be a flashpoint. It will flare out. You can't restrict it between 2 boys who want to sort of fight in a boxing ring. Everybody else gets affected. And so you'll get a greater. And so if I had to look at it, flashpoints exist only towards the Eastern Pacific side, which I would say the East China Sea, South China Sea, the Korean Peninsula, the Taiwan, if it manifests in the manner it's being talked about by the US, that there would be an occupation of Taiwan. So these are the 4 areas. Conflicts which might happen in South Asia between India, China, India, Pakistan are localized efforts. Nobody else is going to come in and jump into the bandwagon. You might have people supporting you, getting diplomatic pressures and instruments, but we will fight. So that's where I would leave it, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've really mapped out the intellectual terrain for us. It's always a hard thing to start the conversation up with such a broad topic. But Ishfaq, if I can turn to you, I mean, you're a retired air commander and a security specialist here in Bangladesh. I mean, one of the things that we tend to do is focus a lot on the big powers, on US and China and strategic competition, and there are very good reasons, as Arun articulated, for why we focus on them. But what is the view from Bangladesh around some of these strategic rivalries and the economic decoupling that's going on, but also around some of these key East Asian flashpoints? I mean, how, from the perspective of we're sitting here in Bangladesh, do middle powers, smaller powers navigate these massive shifting trends in the economic and military balance of power in the region?
So, we are talking about new Asia Pacific. So, as Arun was talking, I was just thinking that we are actually, Asia Pacific is not new. Why? Because you see, for thousands of years, there has been a very close contact between the what we call East Asia and Southeast Asia, South Asia, and especially Bangladesh. You know, from Bangladesh, a place not very far from here, the preacher, Buddhist preacher, what's his name? Atish Dipankar, sorry. Atish Dipankar, born just about 20 miles from here, carried thousands, about 1400, 1500 years back, all these scriptures, Buddhist scriptures, went to China, across the Himalayas, and spreaded the Buddhist religion there. And then Yuan Shang and Tai Yan, two very famous, they are preachers, you know, they were intellectuals. They came back from China to Kumilla and Chittagong, which is not far from here, part of Bangladesh. And this thing was going on. And then from here, the Buddhism and Hinduism spreaded to whole of Southeast Asia, Thailand, you know, Indonesia, Java and all that. So also one of the Chinese admiral who sailed all the way, he came also Sri Lanka, and also this thing was there. But then what happened, one major war, World War II. In World War II, the Japanese forces came all the way, occupied countries after countries, and came along the border of Bangladesh in the south, in Teknaf, and in India, Imphal and Kohima. And those were the last end. And the headquarters of these forces stretching from Teknaf to Kohima was in Kumilla, which is just about 30-40 miles from here, the center. So we were conducting the battlefront from Teknaf to Kohima from here. And that was the last end. And it was the Japanese army, but also our Indian National Army, led by Subhash Chandra Bose. They were also fighting here. So this Asia Pacific security architecture is actually not new, although we are viewing it as it is. Now Arun was talking about colonial legacy. Many of the frontiers here, which have become flashpoints today, are of colonial our history. He had just returned from, he said, the conference on Silchar and Sylhet conference, okay? Then I told him that Silchar should have been part of us because they are all Bengalis. When the Bengal's map was drawn, two of the districts, Silchar here on the east and Gwalpara on the, they were taken out to Assam. And now they are stranded Bengalis in Assam. They should have been part of Bengal. And if they were part of Bengal, they would have been maybe part of Bangladesh today. So these borders are all wrong. Another flashpoint is they are having problem with the Arunachal, which the Chinese say is the South Tibet. And also on the other side, your Ladakh area, they had just about, it's been 2 years or 1.5 years, they had a huge conflict, not very, not human conflict. Casualties were there, although not ended up in a firefight. But both sides are preparing. And on this side also I can see, and it's so clear on Google, both the Chinese and the Indians are preparing for another conflict, which was in 1962. They had a confrontation there. But if they have a confrontation now, it will be much bigger and much wider because they are much more prepared now. I can see because of my Air Force background, I can see how the airfields are being constructed and how the tarmacs are being made and hardened shelters all the way. At least 1 dozen airfields in Assam area. Now I'm not, as a Bangladeshi, I'm not that much worried about what goes on in Ladakh. But if there is a problem here, now China, we always think of when we think China, we think of Kunming and Beijing and all. But China is actually very close to us. 100 kilometers from northern Bangladesh is the Chinese entry point of Nathula. Now Nathula is the front where you had a problem in 64 also, 64, 67, there had a conflict. But right now it is always a road, trades going on and on. But if it becomes hot, that's a problem for Bangladesh because it's just our 100 kilometers north of us. So, these borders, again, we know that these borders were drawn during the colonial times, and at that time China was down with opium, colonial powers forced them to take opium, and opium war was. So the new China, as he says, the China is rising. Now they are asking for revision of the colonial borders drawn, and they don't, now the question is that if the colonial borders are not to be, respected, then we will end up in an endless fight. Like we have problem with Pakistan and Afghanistan on rural land. This line is known as backbone line. The war drawn between India and it was drawn on in Simla. The British drawn on a China pencil, you see, and the Chinese have to representation there. So same way they did it after the Afghan war, they did it across the Bangladesh, Pakistan and Afghanistan border. And now the Afghans, no Afghan government, even the Taliban government, nobody has agreed to this line. And they say, no, our border goes up to the Indus River. The Peshawar and all belongs to us, not to you. So these are the problems. So I will have to continue, but as Arun rightly said, that the peace, and the more we talk of peace and our infrastructure and our business and industry, the cooperation, and also the human cooperation. The better it is than fighting, because that will not help anybody. So, if you come down to, I fully agree with him, is that North Korea today is a oddball in the court. You see, we don't know what he's going to do, and especially when everything depends on one person. He thinks, he walks, he acts, and nobody else. Everybody takes note of what he says. Otherwise, they vanish. So after that, the Taiwan is definitely a problem because again, it's historical legacy. But as far as I know, that the most Taiwanese today, about 80% of the time, because all of them were born long after 1949, most of them. Before that, very few are arrived. But they have always seen Taiwan as an independent, as a sort of separate entity. And there is a general survey says that about 80% people, they want to identify themselves as Taiwanese. But here, including Bangladesh, we say one China, and we do not have any direct communications of any sort, trade and commerce with Taiwan. But Taiwan is a industrial country, very small but very advanced, educated, and the country is we may come down later on, country is small but very well prepared for defense. And any war over there will be costly for both sides and of course for the world also. Now, as far as Bangladesh specifically, that you asked that question about Bangladesh's position. Now we have challenges and opportunities. Challenges and opportunities because Bangladesh is positioned in such a way that we have China, as I said, just 100 kilometers away. We have and India. China has already risen, and we keep saying that India is rising. India. Yesterday also someone said that India is rising, but actually not rising. But it is rising because from 40th GDP, now today they have almost 9th or 10th. And Modi said in his next visit it will be third. It will be third. So although the per capita income is still here, or even GDP, HDI index is still below, but India is a major economic power, and Bangladesh, because it's straddled between the two, we have the advantage of taking best from both sides. We have our largest trading partner is China, although China mostly we import and very little exports. On India side also, the next is India. Again we mostly import, and the export, by the way, is rising, and it's $1 billion today out of $12 billion. 1 billion our business. 16 billion exports. Okay, it's rising, which is very positive. Same in China, and Western world is our biggest export market. United States is the single largest export market, and European Union is the next. And if you take together European Union and so it is almost all our exports are going there. So this is from you can say opportunities and challenges for Bangladesh is to keep both sides happy. I mean, today in Bangladesh, many of the infrastructures are being built on the Chinese loan because China has the money, and it's $1 trillion they have. But again, contrary to popular perceptions, still the World Bank, Asian Development, IMF, these are our major donors. Japan is very strong. Japan is, I think, that one of the major investors in this country, and with the Japanese economic zone coming up, Japan is going to be very important. And as far as I'm concerned, Japanese investments are really good investments and good use. And then, of course, Koreans are also there. So Bangladesh is in a very comfortable position. And because it is in a comfortable, important position, so the interest is also great. I mean, these sort of conferences, in the past we only had conferences how to solve the food problem or how to, alleviate poverty and, that sort of thing. But today, the more concentration on the importance of Bangladesh in the regional and also global. So I think I'll stop there, and we can discuss more about it. But let me say that we are sitting on a center stage of opportunities and challenges.
Thank you very much. And Satoru, we'd like to bring you into the conversation. Yes, there is a sort of there is a sort of consensus that there are a range of sort of border disputes and tensions across the Indo-Pacific region, but the key flashpoints are actually in East Asia, and a lot of those flashpoints are sort of maritime and territorial in nature. So I would like to get your perspective here. And Ishfaq mentioned the important role of Japan, but how is Japan using alliances and partnerships with states like the United States and India and others to bolster its vision for regional order? What's the kind of view of the desirable security architecture that's coming from Japan?
Okay, the security architecture is changing in this region, I think. For a long time, in this region, the security architecture, so how to deter the conflict, how to deter any crisis in this region, based on hub and spoke system. Hub is the United States, and spoke are US allies. So US and Japan, this is a bilateral ally. And US and Australia is right, US and South Korea, US and Philippines, US and Thailand, this kind of bilateral relation consists one system, hub and spoke. This is security architecture. In this system, all of the information gathered to the United States, the US controls everything in it. So that's why this system itself heavily rely on the United States. That is security system in the traditional one is here. But at the same time, now we are changing this security architecture to the network based. Because in the hub and spoke system, both Australia and Japan allow the United States, but Japan and Australia is not allowed. So that's why only United States manage this system. But when we see the recent flashpoint in the many areas around China, we can say one thing. This system is not enough to deter China. So because China is rich, China has the money, and China invests heavily on the military modernization. In this case, the U.S.-China military balance is changing. Of course, still the U.S. is stronger than China, but at the same time, we need to say we need new security architecture. In this case, U.S. asked allies and partners to share the security burden. That's why the new network-based security is a new system in this region. For example, the Japan cooperates with Australia and shows the presence in the South China Sea. This is a part of the U.S. role in the past, but the U.S. asked these allies to share the security burden. That is network-based. So many unilateral, trilateral, quadrilateral, including Quad, including AUKUS, each forming network-based security architecture. That is a new one. And when we see the pattern of the China's territorial expansion, we can say this is very effective. Pattern is we can see in the South China Sea in the past. For example, in 1950s, when France withdrew from Indochina Peninsula, they took the half of the Paracel Island. In 1970s, the US withdrew from Vietnam, China took another half of the Paracel Island. In 1980s, Soviet troops reduced number in Vietnam, China took 6 feet of the Strating Island. And in 1990s, when US withdrew from Philippines, China took the Misty Cliff. So every time military balance has changed, the power vacuum they found, they try to steal it. That is a pattern of China's military expansion. So to deal with China, we need to maintain military balance. But I have already said that China is rich. That is a problem. So in this case, how to deal with? Sharing security burden is a matter. And if Japan and Australia and India cooperate with each other, China needs to divide their military expenditure multi-direction against Japan, against India. In India-China that is very important for that point too. And against South China Sea, in Australia there, Southeast Asian countries there. So that's why this is new way to maintain military balance to deter China's territorial expansion. So that's why this network-based security system is important. So from hub and spoke to the network-based system, that is a new trend of the security architecture in this place. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question, stick with you for a minute, Satoru, on that answer, because maintaining a military balance of power can carry its own risks, for example, in activating a security dilemma. And what you're describing there is a kind of network-based, I mean, I agree with you. I think that does really actually define the new or the emerging security architecture through the use of strategic unilaterals, through the use of increased defence cooperation, and through the term integrated deterrence, which is one that has appeared in US declaratory policy. But my question is, in trying to maintain this military balance by deterring China through the use of increased military cooperation and build-up, does that carry the risk of intensifying the likelihood of conflict in the region? And are there other forms of cooperation that might alleviate the risk of conflict?
It should rely on the gap between the US military power and the China military power, I believe, because when we check which side won the last 3 competition, we can say one thing: the bigger power won the competition, of course. For example, the World War I, the 32 countries form the winner side, and the 4 countries consist the loser side. So this means a bigger group, bigger power won. World War I, World War I, I said, World War II, in this case, 54 versus 8. Including Japan, unfortunately, but and U.S. Soviet Cold War 54 versus 26. So this means that if the U.S. want to deter the China's activity, not the security dilemma, they need to show that U.S. need to prove they will be the winner. That's why China cannot do that, something like that. In this case, they rely on the number of allies, number of or size of power. Indeed, the US has 53 formal treaty-based allies, including NATO, 31, 31, and if we include Taiwan in this case, indeed the number is 53. Now, recent one is Finland, of course. But China, treaty-based allies only North Korea. So that's for 53 versus 1. So each US exploits this situation, there is a possibility US can win, and China hesitate to challenge against US reach order. So that's why to deter this situation, how many countries cooperate each other is a very important key. So that's why to avoid security dilemma, we need to widen the gap between US and China. In this case, cooperation is the key. That is my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I did want to come back to you on that, but can I add a question for you at the same time? Yes. So I wanted your view on the emerging security architecture as Satoru explained it, this idea of a network-based architecture. But I also wanted to ask you whether you think that the emerging security architecture is much more likely to be based on might rather than right. That is, it's going to be more based on power than it is going to be based on rules. And the reason I ask you that is that this is a Bay of Bengal conversation, and actually this has been the site of using international legal mechanisms to resolve border disputes between Bangladesh and India in the Bay of Bengal. So I wanted to get your view on whether or not rights and rules still are going to play an important role in this emerging architecture.
Thank you very much. First of all, to me, Professor Satoru Nagao's view of the military architecture appeared to me to be what they call hawkish. A little hawkish in the sense that you have to have force to counter that and you have to overcome that. That's what probably you are saying, that the United States and its allies must get together, be a stronger force to stop the Chinese expansion. But if you look from the Chinese point of view, they will say that we are only exercising our right, which has been denied to us for all these centuries of the colonialism. And in fact, again going back to the World War II, when Japan entered the war, the main aim of Japanese administration was to reach the source of oil in the Middle East and also in the Southeast Asia, Burma and Indonesia, because with their industrialization they needed oil. The Chinese today is also looking for, and because they have grown up their industrial base and everything, but they don't have, they are looking for the route to the safe and route to the Middle East and to Europe and all, which is secure. And much of what we say, the Chinese expansionist ideas, in the sense, you might say BRI and all, are the result of the Chinese Chinese view that in future we are going to run short of the raw materials, which others are being concerned. So, but I think that, like we discussed yesterday also, that as long as the countries are tied together by economic relationship and common interest, you see, common interest of progress, the less and less will be the military option, feasible military option. Actually, when you run into an arms race, there is no end to it. You create something, and quite often in the military, say suppose somebody designs a fantastic tank, then the government, others will say that now you design something which will destroy that tank. So you get into some anti-tank with that. Somebody puts an aircraft, so you have to destroy the tank. And it ends into an endless arms cycle, and who pays for it are the poor people, or the ordinary people. So this has led to our First World War, Second World War, the whole NATO, the Cold War was based on the the military, the China, Soviet goes here, so Americans go up there, upstream. Then the Soviets go here, and ultimately it resulted in the total, dismemberment of the Soviet Union. Not because it lost a war, but it could not sustain economically. And same thing happened in Vietnam. You see the how much bombing and how much you see every time you mentioned about McNamara. McNamara also said that I will end the war, but he could not. And Vietnam they did not lose any battle, but they lost the war. In America being at that time the number one power. So military is not the really solution. And we want peaceful. For example, right now China and India has a $1 trillion business. Not trillion, but $130 billion. And now every politician, both in China and India, will think that should we have a hot war or should we continue to do business? So that is our guarantee. So in coming down to Bangladesh also, we have this challenge, and we still believe, that's our policy, that we'll not, without taking any sides, we would encourage cooperation in every field, economic field, culture field, people-to-people contact. For example, this sort of conferences opens up people's ideas and all. And we believe that leaving these problems maybe from the history to resolve itself, but for the present we continue to work together. But then there are issues, as this rule-based thing you said. For example, I must agree that in China, about the South China Sea, like in Bangladesh, actually we have no problem. We have solved our Bay of Bengal divided both with Myanmar and India. And through United Nations architecture and negotiation, we have solved it. If we can solve it, why can't they do it in the Indonesia or Vietnam and all China? Because China is unilaterally declared their 9-dash line. And interestingly, not only the People's Republic of China, even Taiwan said that is the line. And even Taiwan, the government which is there in Taiwan, demands the same border. Arunachal, they demand the Arunachal, and they demand these Eastern Ladakh as part of the Chinese territory. Although they don't have any means to implement it, but in their map it is there. They claim Chinese. So things that these are the issues that are rising, and in that Bangladesh is in some way we are in the field. As network, we say, if you take Bay of Bengal, we are right in the center. We are up there in the Himalayas, and on this side in the Southeast Asia now. So we will continue to remain very important, but it is very important for our government and our foreign policy makers to stay in balance. At this time, we are under pressure from the West, especially from the United States, probably to be more candid about what we are going to do about Southeast Asian architecture or quads and things like that. But our government has refrained, and our people I would say the people by and large, we are not interested in their conflict, but we are interested in their business, we are interested in their infrastructure. For example, this Kolkata-Kunming highway. This was a highway which was part of the Asian highway, and it will go over Bangladesh. We have done, from our side, we have done everything, right up to the Myanmar border. We have got 4-lane highway going, but the Myanmar government, because it's so close and all, won't allow this to go on, and to that connected Kunming and then onwards to other, all of it, China. So these are our future. If imagine if you have a Latula border, no trades over there, whole of Tibet's trading can be done through Bangladesh, because that's the shortest. We have the roads and railway network ready. We have 3 ports, Mongla, Paira coming up, and Chittagong itself. 3 ports ready to handle all these northeastern traffic, also the Tibetan traffic. And the best way to get into the Bay of Bengal is But there has to be a peaceful atmosphere there, and a sort of confidence in everybody that yes, these trade groups can work. And no, then Bangladesh will be benefited, Northeast India will be benefited, people will be benefited. That's what we are doing.
Thank you very much. I did want to bring Arun into the conversation here, but before I do that, I would like an opportunity for audience members here to ask a question. So this will be my last question, and then those of you in the audience who have a question, if you could use the microphone stands to ask it. And you might have to walk up to the microphone stand when you get an opportunity. But my last question to you is really, to reflect on some of the conversation that's been had. Do you agree that the emerging security architecture is really that kind of network-based architecture that was described before? What role is there for institutions, multilateral, minilateral institutions in trying to establish order or trying to prevent conflict from emerging in the first place? But an additional kind of question is, with India, it seems that there is this movement towards, I guess, the United States through minilaterals like the Quad, but it seems from an outsider perspective, like my own, to be driven by these shared concerns about the China, I was going to say rising China, but let's say the risen China. How like-minded are these states though? Like, is this concern around China enough to really bind, for example, the Quad states together in a way that they will mobilise in case of conflict in the region?
Okay, just let me put, I have a different take. I think it was very simplistic. I thought military power, I'm strong, I become stronger. I have 3 people, I have 50 people. I think that's too simplistic to look at this problem, because the world has changed. And I think, where does India really come in? As you said, India's role as a middle power, and because of her geographical location and the domination that we have in the Indian Ocean, the manner that's a geographical reality. You have a role to play in the future world order that's going to emerge. And in the future world order that's going to emerge, it's a polycentric. Linkages will remain irrespective. India, when we went to war or had the conflict in Galwan, our bilateral trade was $91 billion. It's gone up to $130 billion. This is after all the negative lists that we have put out of the Chinese. So in spite of the problems, trade has continued. So I think it's no longer going to be a clean black and white kind of a situation. So how do I see it? There are 3 ways to look at deterrence. And this is where the Quad, and just one more question on the Quad. Quad actually preceded the rise of China. Quad was not a reflection on China. Quad came up after the tsunami of Indonesia. That is 2003, 2004, the Quad was there. What was it created for? To look at giving resilience and dealing with non-traditional threats of climate change. It got a fillip in 2009 when Hillary Clinton and Obama came down and spoke here, and that was to give their condition of getting the first start of collaborative security, really, but more importantly, to have a finger in the pie where the geoeconomics had shifted to Asia Pacific. So I don't think, so anything that happened with Quad today as a security architecture is wrongly perceived. What it did was, and which it is now addressing, is that there are 3 ways that you look at deterrence. Deterrence by punishment, deterrence by denial. Deterrence by denial was the strategy which China adopted while it had a asymmetry with the US in the naval power. It looked at the anti-access, anti-denial strategy. What was it? Move it up ahead, get closer to the first line, a specific line of islands, first chain, second chain, and don't let them come close enough. So the collaborative security structures or the bilateral security structure with Japan, Taiwan and all could not be executed. So that was denial. What is Quad looking at? We are talking about what the world needs today is deterrence by resilience. And how is that resilience created? This is where the roles of minilaterals, multilaterals, capability aggregation, linkages will come into play. The military structure is the last, it's an element which is a fallout of thing which is in the perception of mind of people, how they view it. I look at a half glass empty or a half glass full. That's how you want to see a partnership, whether it's a military alliance or not. All these exercises that were happening here, the bilateral, trilateral, the Malabar exercises, started off in 2005, 7 and 8 here. They didn't start now. And China's rise is actually
around 12, 13, 14 when it really sort of became a power really, not before that. Before it was still rising. Today, it is assertive. And what does China use? Why this denial by resilience, I'm saying? And that's the focus. Why? Because the strength and instrument of Chinese domination and involvement is the geoeconomics, his economic power, which I can't sustain. If Bangladesh needs something or a neighbor needs, I can't give it. The US can't give it sitting there to everyone. So what happens is China is creating that, and we had the problem in Sri Lanka because of that. That debt trap story. The CPEC, 64 billion along the China-Pakistan economic corridor has gone far because it hasn't gone anywhere. Are you getting my point? So he's using that instrument of economics. So how do I tackle that? And that's where this resilience issue comes in, denial by resilience. And this denial by resilience is a Quad, is a partnership, is looking at lines of operation. Post-COVID, it got accentuated. We realized we need India calls it Atmanirbharta, but self-reliance in critical issues. That's what all nations are doing now. Otherwise, you're making smaller groupings, which are economic groupings, which are linked towards looking at non-traditional threats. And this part of Asia is ridden with climatic issues here. We are, I think, the most affected part, the Oceania, the Pacific Ocean country, and our part of the world is Vietnam and Bangladesh are the two largest states which are going to get impacted because of climate change, and their Mujib plan and their Delta plan are fantastic. The resilience towards and mitigation strategy to climate change is being led by Bangladesh in a very, very major manner. So I think we have to understand all these issues have to be tackled. And today when I look at it, collaborative security is the answer. Security connotation is not only just military, but all across the spectrum. The second thing is this capability aggregation. When I look at capability aggregation, the political and economic integration is an answer of the Quad. The AUKUS is a technological capability enhancement that you're seeing. So when we look at all these pillars, this is where resilience is coming in. And that's the path to go ahead. Military is a very small element. It's like, I pay insurance for all my life and I don't want to go to the hospital, yeah. I pay insurance for the military because I don't want to go to war. I don't give it, it's an insurance policy. So you must have might is required because, as I say now, an iron fist in a velvet glove. A velvet glove has to be the resilience. The iron fist has to be that there should be an apparent show of power because China looks at two things. It's a power hierarchical system of dealing. If I am strong and you are weak, and when we have a collaboration, the resultant answer is if the weak gives in, not the strong gives in anything. Are you getting my point? So today you have to have the might, which is the show of collaborative aggregation of your capability, and the other is to have resilience, so that your dependence on them gets removed. So that's how I look at it, and I would say that's the path that we should look around. And that's why India says we're not in any alliance. We are part of partnerships for everything. We have a great partnership with Bangladesh. I think today the stability in the two countries has never seen. This is the golden era of relationship between the two of us. Our trade in the last 5 years has grown by about 6 times over. It's gone to 16 billion from 6 billion. It's phenomenal. Thank you very much. Sorry. This is, as I said, a very exciting subject to go on.
Yeah, no. That was a wonderful answer. But we might turn. We've got about 15 minutes for Q&A. So I see there's a question at the front. Sorry. Would you like to step up to the microphone? And anybody else who has a question, please feel free to step up and head to the microphone. I'll take 3 questions and then I'll present them to the panel, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, so Greg Simons is my name. A very interesting and lively panel, and very based on this realism, which is quite good. I would like to go into things a bit more and then ask something provocative. So, you'd be talking about the role how geoeconomics supports geopolitics. And this is absolutely true, and it's quite often represented in constructs today as it was previously. The Japanese East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere is a historical example. Belt Road Initiative is a contemporary one. And this gives some kind of signal of intention and geostrategy. So that's on that side. But one thing that has been kind of ignored here is the geostrategy of the US, especially within the context, it's a declining hegemon. and it doesn't want to. It's trying to claim it back. And this is something the Biden administration made clear, and that was one of their election promises. And if we look at that, what is US geostrategy? Well, I mean, this is boiling down to what Brzezinski said in 1997, the three geostrategic imperatives: to keep the vassal states dependent and obedient, if you want to call it that, client states protected and obedient, and to prevent any rise of competing powers or groups of powers. So Belt Road Initiative is a big red flag for them. But I mean, from what I hear from here, I mean, you're quite often talking about this measure of activity as the main point. Throw in more men, throw in this, that, more equipment. But I mean, you've also got the measure of effectiveness of what you put in there. And you've got these intangibles. I mean, after Afghanistan, US credibility took a good hit. And when you have a hegemon doing something like that, others are going to fill that vacuum. And coming into the point, I mean, you come to the point, I mean, in this region, historically, has been an object of external great power interests and competition. Now you have this geopolitical transformation, and you stand at a point where you can be either an object or a subject of events. So, I mean, for all three of you, I mean, because the US, frankly, as the British Empire was before it, is a maritime power, as is Japan primarily. What you're trying to go against, if we couple the bull, is to go against a continental power, a substantial one. So, I mean, we see how that happens. Iraq against Iran. To come to the point, okay, what are the main threats and weaknesses you see for the local actors here to retain their autonomy and to be a subject rather than an object of things as they unfold?
Okay, thank you very much. Look, we don't have as much time.
Yeah, two more quick questions there.
Look, I'm sorry. I've been told that we need to wrap this up, and we've only got 4 minutes to go.
Take the question and you can answer it.
Thank you. But keep it very brief, thank you.
Very short.
Thank you, moderator, for the opportunity. I'm a journalist. My question is like NATO. My name is Mohsin. I work for Daily Shamokal. I'm a journalist. So my question is, I mean, as you know, NATO is not against Russia, as the NATO member always claim. So Russia take it as in their against. So similarly, Quad is saying they are not here to counter China, but China thinks they're countering China. So my question is whom to believe? As because China is denying, the Quad is denying, whom to believe? What is the solution over here? Thank you.
Thank you. We've got 1 minute each. Ishfaq, would you like to start?
Both the questions, frankly speaking, I myself and most of us in South Asia and also in Bangladesh, we do not want to be subject or object of any big power rivalry. Because we have seen for thousands of years, this Indian subcontinent has been invaded from outside. And the invaders have always won. And the last one was from British, and who came very close to, in Kolkata, and which is very close to the part of Bengal. And we allowed them to come in, and then we have seen the result of 200 years of colonialism. So my own view is that we should stay neutral, should not get involved in any power struggle of this nature, let them fight it out. But we must tread our path very carefully so that, as I said, the economic benefits, the peaceful means of cooperations is okay with Bangladesh, but we must not and should not get into any sort of alliance of military nature, but alliance of economic alliance, first class.
Wonderful. Thank you. Arun?
Yeah, I think you asked a very clear question. I think there's a trust deficit as far as the US is concerned. Got aggravated after Afghanistan. Nobody wants to fall into his prey. And I think today the only way you can go is what India is talking about. It is inclusive development within the nation and within South Asia. That's the whole story we are doing. South Asia is together. If it's a fist, nobody can break us. But if tomorrow you have fingers, everybody will take advantage. So that's the aim of the policy of the government, and that's how it's helping us. And the second thing is look at self-reliance. Develop lines of operations and economic linkages within the nation. Why should it take me? It's cheaper for me to carry goods to Germany than to bring it into Bangladesh, or the other way around, because our infrastructure is short, and that's what we were talking there. So I think this the awareness is coming into the nations here between Nepal, Bhutan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, that guys, we need to be on our own, and our strength is us. What he's talking about, numbers, and that's how the greater cooperation within the nation states of South Asia is the way forward, and that's what is happening now. So stability is the answer, and that's what each of us looks at. You have political stability, you will grow big. So I think strategic autonomy has to be exercised only if you're self-reliant and you are competent enough to be able to survive the hazards like Russia has survived, irrespective of it. Who believes America? He buys uranium from Russia still and pays them in dollars and tells you don't buy anything. Germany buys oil from there and says you don't buy oil. I mean, what nonsense is this? Yeah? So we are no longer living in that world where you can say something and accept. So you now need to change, walk the talk, baby, and then we'll talk with you. So the strategic autonomy is required for these regions. Self-reliant, get your act together in regional alliances and regional grouping, and that is what we are working. And the last bit which I would say is, I think there is a need for the West to start looking at the fact that the world has changed. So please reconfigure the institutions of rule-making bodies. Otherwise, the revisionist power of China will use some other means which it has used. We've seen it in the COVID time, how the World Health, WHO became a lackey of the whole economic power of that. Please change the organization and international organization to be more inclusive of the voice of the global South and the people like us who are the middle powers who will make a difference for the future emerging order. Thank you.
And the final word, Satoru.
Thank you very much. Yes, the Hudson Institute is a US think tank, so I need to say about the United States. But to be from Japan. When we check the history of the United States last 250 years, they have changed from just a colony of British Empire to the only one superpower in the world. And during the process, all of the rivals was defeated, and we cannot find these rivals like Germany, Japan Empire, or Soviet Union. So, viewed from this situation, I cannot expect the US will allow China to be the rival in the future. So in this means that, yes, it will be the Cold War, it will be the war, I don't know exactly, but anyway, if the China survive this competition, it will be the first miracle last 250 years. I cannot expect that.
Thank you. And thank you for being brief. And thank you to all of our questions and our panelists. I'm afraid that that is all that we have time for, and I think that we're about to get sent off the stage.
Thank you to our speakers. Requesting.
Just a comment, no question.
Oh, sure.
Just remember the story, Animal Farm. All animals are equal in the jungle. Some are more equal than others. These are plastic.